We're going to ask some provocative questions. I want you guys to really go for it. I want you guys to contribute. The point about this session is we're going to fill it with energy and as many solutions and as many perspectives as possible. This isn't a presentation, this is more like a discussion. And if we can finish on a really high note with lots of interesting ideas, we're all filled to the brim with stuff that we've heard and stuff we've absorbed. So this is an opportunity to throw it all up in the air and throw it around and see where we get to, because this is the end, so this is it. That's very final, isn't it? So now by this stage, no pressure. So now that by this stage, you know Dan, you know Angela, and you know Di. So I don't really need to introduce them, but you know that you've got three very interesting perspectives and approaches here. So the provocation is, can farmers be paid for nutrient density? So I think what we should do is I'm going to throw to each of you, and I want you each to spend, 3 or 4 minutes talking briefly to this idea. And I'm just going to start by saying I personally think this is only half the question, because can farmers be paid for nutrient density is a great question, but the other question is, will consumers pay for nutrient density? And I think that's an important part of it. So why don't you guys go for it, and then let's have a chat. If you guys want to talk and you want to make a comment, it's going to need to be recorded, so you need to come up. Otherwise we'll have to repeat them, and that's quite hard. Otherwise, if it's a simple question, that's fine too. So 5 minutes each, yeah?
You get first. You don't want to? What's that? You like? I like to follow too. Better to respond than to lead. Can farmers be paid for nutrient density? I would reframe it slightly to something about can nutrient density increase economic viability? I think the foundation of what we're trying to support here for farms is a better livelihood, a better income, a better quality of life. And my personal experience as a farmer is that what started me on this whole path was that I was making a living working 20 hours a week, not charging a premium because my cost of production was lower. I was charging at the market price in my, crop type. I had better shelf life. I had better flavor. So I could get any customer I wanted and have a long-term contract. And because I had increased soil health, increased pest and disease resistance, lower input costs, better yields, effectively, my economic viability was dramatically increased because I was producing nutrient-dense crops. Not because I was marketing them as such. I was not making any claims about being organic or local or anything whatsoever. It was just a better quality for my customer. And so they were happy to pay the going price for it. Now, broadly, systemically, all the vision that I've been putting forth with meters and definitions, it does seem to be the case that there's a premium made for superior quality by a certain percentage of the buying public. If people understand that something is better, they're willing to pay for it. I know a lot of people who are growing cherries or growing, oranges or whatever that are being paid ridiculous dollars per pound because the Japanese come sniff them out and say, we'll pay you $20 a pound for your cherries because they're of exceptional quality. I think, what do they say? There's never been an excess of high quality produce on the market. So the more we can get these metrics established, the more consumers can begin to understand what the variation is. I think there's going to be the people who have, excess capital are going to be willing to pay whatever for the stuff that they understand is actually better. And there's going to be a competition amongst the buyers to access that. So I would suggest, from a practical standpoint, as we begin to define quality and build instruments to assess it, that those who are doing a good job are going to be offered premiums. I don't think this strategy requires premiums. I think the strategy actually is most viable when we understand that we can outcompete on cost because working with nature is more efficient. And that's the way to ameliorate any concerns about people who have, less money and less economic capacity. And I would say that's the way we win. We don't win by charging more. We win by doing a better job And I am fully convinced that working with nature is a more efficient strategy. I've had a few conversations here over the past couple of days about what do they call it? I mean, I call it fake meat. Lab grown, whatever stuff. How about the what do they call it? CEA, controlled environment agriculture, hydroponics, right? There's been billions and billions of dollars invested in these things by people who think they can make massive profits, and there's been billions of dollars lost because actually nature is more efficient. So I think that's really what it comes down to. But I'll just leave that as an opening salvo.
Kia ora koutou. So I believe the question that was just answered by Dan was, what's the question?
Well, the question is, can farmers be paid for nutrient density?
Okay, so but if I was to keep the original question, I think Dan just answered the question, can farmers get paid for nutrient density? My question is, can farmers get paid for nutrient density? Because it's a bit like asking, can farmers get paid to be organic, or can farmers get paid for regenerative practices? As I see it, the issue isn't necessarily the quality standards of the produce they're paid, of the food they're creating. The issue sits with the rest of the food system and its intrinsic and relentless way of trying to pay farmers less and less. So it's not just the quality aspects of the food we're producing. If we're going to redesign this, we need to redesign the whole system. So I want to see a nutrient-dense supply chain as much as I want to see nutrient-dense food, or I want to see a mana-centered supply chain. Because until we change those relationships about how we value the people who are producing our food, we're always going to be in this diminishing game of global supply chains that will seek to pay farmers less and less. And so for a while, we might be in a position where we can say, clearly we can measure the nutrient density and this is going to be better for my family. And I have to say, I've actually been a bit of a fangirl of Dan and have been following his whole, I've been trying to get a good photo with him the whole couple of days. Yeah. Thanks. And what I love about it, thanks mate. Anna Marie, yes. Yes. Thanks, mate. What I love about his position and his approach is that he's so determined to open source this, and I just absolutely love his dedication to that, and I think it's incredible, and I applaud it so loudly. Look at her. She's wrapped. She's absolutely wrapped. So yes, I think on its own, we can definitely see a premium for nutrient density, because as a mother, if I am given a tool that tells me that this apple is more nutrient dense than this apple, every time I'm going to choose the more nutrient dense apple. The bit I worry about and that I want to see solved is, how do I ensure the premium that's given for that nutrient dense apple finds its way back to the farmers?
Yeah, I agree with both so far, but what I'd like to just add to it is beyond nutrient density, nutrient diversity and microbial diversity into the foods. And I think as a society, we perhaps need to look at the whole picture. Food as an outcome from working with the land, but as a result of that, there's so many other outcomes that need to be factored into the value of the produce coming off the land, and that is the ecological services and ensuring that our planetary boundaries aren't being challenged in the process of creating that product. So just so that we can all have a livable planet forever and a day. I think as a society we need to recognise that in all our consumables. Somehow or other now the systems have gone Arable a long, long time ago, and exactly like you're saying, with the farmers being squeezed, the people on the land being squeezed to produce more and more for less and less, and the planet's in the state that it is as a result of that. So as a society, we need to equally shoulder the responsibility of making that change and making the change within the systems, pushing our governments to make the change, to change those systems from the ground up, so that we can all benefit not only with our health, but making sure we've got a beautiful, biodiverse, cool and livable planet forever and a day.
Let's just do that.
No, exactly. That's it. Okay, well, we can all go home now because we're sorted. So I work obviously at the kind of coalface of the retail relationship, and I completely subscribe to everything that you say, and I source from farmers like you guys, and we pay above the odds, and the margins in our business are really tight, and I can tell you that the experience at the retail coalface is that while you might pay more for that nutrient-dense apple, there's a whole lot of people who won't. And it's not because they don't love their children and want to feed their children great food. It's because they've got all the squeeze of everything else and they don't have time to absorb this lesson. They don't have time to learn this stuff. So, I mean, I know that we're talking big picture here and we're talking about changing systems, but to change the systems, we've got to have grassroots change, because regulatory change and policy change, that all takes so long. So how do you think we should go about actually creating the answer to this question, you know, at the coalface, without yet having that meter in my hand? What can we do?
What would be some proposals about how the system could be more well organized?
Yes, the system, but also what do you think we should be saying to people about that food that we're offering them?
As I said, when I was farming full time, I didn't say anything to anybody.
Were you dealing directly with customers though?
I was selling to a restaurant, a health food store, a retreat center, a couple restaurants. Yeah, it was all, you know, I guess, yeah, so that was what it was. It was not farmers markets, not CSAs.
How did you find those customers?
I found the customers, I mean, when I would drop off my kale and carrots and beets on Thursdays at the health food store, people got to know that on Thursdays there were better beets and carrots, and they came in, and I mean, people are animals and they have a visceral sense of things and they pay attention to patterns. And so, you know, it's what happened that my delivery day was Thursdays at the health food store, and people got in the habit of showing up and getting my stuff when they wouldn't get other people's stuff. And that was something that the produce manager understood and told me about. My chef that I worked with, you know, when I first got the contract with him, all I said was, I brought in samples and I said, take these, stick them in the back of your cooler. I'm going to call you in 3 weeks. Go and take them out and look at them and taste them. And that was it. And I dropped them off, and then I waited 3 weeks, and I called him and I said, go back into your cooler and take them out. And he's like, Jesus, how much are you charging? Yeah, you got the contract. So for me, you know, walk the talk, you know, actions speak louder than words, speak softly, carry a large stick. Like, you don't, if it's real, you don't need to talk about it. And, you know, I said money grows on the ground, you know, like it just grows on the ground. If you have healthy plants, they perform and they do amazing things. They do profound things. It's absolutely just, it's awe-inspiring when things are working well, how beautiful it is. It's a sacred experience. So, I think the thing to do is to become a really good farmer and to not bother yourself with anything else because you can't control anything else. A bunch of people have talked to me about like the American political situation and, you know, well, maybe RFK and what about Joel Salatin? I'm like, guys, no, it's rigged. It's like, focus your mind on what you have the capacity to do. What you don't have a capacity to do is a mental masturbation. You literally are distracting yourself from what you have the capacity to do. And that's a brilliant tool of the system to distract us, to engage us in us, them, and fanciful thinking and ungroundedness. Like, if we simply do our work and walk the talk, we take our power and we are responsible for ourselves. And that is foundationally all we can do. So that was my way of getting paid for nutrient density, was actually producing nutrient dense crops and getting to a point where my economic viability was mind blowing. And I grew up in the organic movement. My parents ran an organic farming organization. I know about economic viability as a farmer. I know how hard it is. I know how everybody has off-farm jobs to pay for their farming habit, right? That's just the way it is. And when I got to the point where I was doing something entirely different, it really struck me. It really was like, my God, I mean, I used to be really, really shy. I don't know if I fake it now, but like, the last thing I would do was public speak. You know, I was forced to try out for the high school musical because that's what I was supposed to do. And I ended up getting a big part when I was a senior. I'm like, no, I'll take a backup dancer role, but there's no way I'm taking a speaking role. So me as a person, as an introvert, like, when I saw what it was that was possible, it was this compulsion, this obligation, a responsibility to speak to what I see and understand. But I think, you know, it's great to think about the ways that policy can be shifted. It's great to conceptualize the opportunities about how things could be different. But the actual fact is, walk the talk, do the work, you know, lead by example. You know, when people see things, like, that's seeing is believing. So I think if we lead by example, that's the way forward. So there's a little bit of a ramble.
Food is a goddamn human right. That's what I have to say about changing the system. The truth is that we all need food to survive. And the fact that 100% of our food sits in the transactionary economy is wrong. And I'm not saying that people shouldn't get paid to grow food, because that's super important and those are beautiful livelihoods, hence the Haggertys beside me. But can we imagine another way so we can ensure that the people who don't have access to good food to keep them well can still access good food? Can we just take all of the pieces of the puzzle, give them a shake in the box, upend them, and work out if there's another way of putting this together? Because the problem is that we have growing food insecurity in both our countries, in both New Zealand and Australia. And that inequity of food access is going to come back to bite us all on the arse. And in New Zealand, that looks like farmers who are starting to install security systems because there's so much poaching on their land at the moment. Or that there's just really adverse outcomes in terms of the societies and the communities that their children go to school in. So we have to rethink the whole system, and we have to find a way for everybody to have enough food to keep them well. So yes, it's important to think about how we make good money from really high quality food, and that has to continue. There has to be a genuine reward for the people who are prepared to put in the mahi, as we say in my country, do the mahi, get the treats. But more, look at Matthew Evans out there as he's like, is this going well? I think it's going well. This is the man in charge of the program. Just because no one else is going to do this and we've just pulled him into the tent, can we all say thank you to Matthew? Matthew, we're just talking about changing the world up here. So how do we redesign our system so absolutely everybody has access to good nutrient food?
I think the discussion this afternoon in this tent a bit earlier on too about shortening supply chains and building collaborative relationships. I think there's a lot of people from really diverse parts of the community that really want to work together on this kind of thing. We did discuss that once those supply chains are shortened, the end product to the consumer is actually at a far more economically appropriate price, and with the best value going to the producer and still kinder on the consumer's pocket. So I think we have to continue working, strongly in that vein as well. The relationships and awareness, and I think there's a lot of people at that retail end who are keen to ensure that the people that they're supplying really do understand what it is they're purchasing and what benefits they may be achieving from purchasing that product. And at the end of the day, that is the one power that a consumer has, is where they choose to spend their money.
I think there's an important piece just talking about food insecurity. I think there's a systemic issue with land tenure and land access, and I really personally have the opinion that people should be growing their own food, and that the only way we actually will have a powerful, strong culture is if people have that deep relationship with land and their own visceral independence because of their relationship with it. So I'm not sure that's at all on topic, but personally, it's one of my deepest calls to action is occupy the land. And I think as far as strategic end games, if you work out the chess match of what does success look like? Where I'm from in North America, the traditional culture basically said that we belong to the land. We are animals that belong to the land, and our responsibility is caretaker of that land. And as part of that dynamic, we are provided for by the land, and the land provides for us beautifully. I'm not suggesting that we can immediately go to a no property rights situation culturally, but I think I mentioned this recently. I don't remember exactly where it was, but I've been reading this book, Anastasia, which a series, I think I brought it up yesterday. There's this thing in the Russian Constitution which says that everyone who asks for it is given, I think it's something like 3/4 of an acre. It's called a dacha. And every single citizen has the right to land. It's in the Constitution that you have the right to land. You have the right to land tenure. And I think a large part of what's at the root of our social ills is our separation from land, separation from nature. And if we want to, not quite go to that point of we belong to the land and still have property boundaries, because we'll probably have to think about that for a while until we become much more deeply healed. I really think that sort of sovereignty is foundational to systemic solutions. So.
Yeah, we've kind of moved away from the idea of farmers getting paid for nutrient density, but it's all connected, isn't it? That's it, exactly. And there was a beautiful session in here earlier today on succession. I don't know if you guys were party to that, but that was really interesting. And the idea of reintroducing the idea of the commons and how that works, because I think what you're saying is right. And I see that in my business too. When people feel some kind of connection to the people who grow their food, it's like the lights go on. You literally see their eyes change, and it's very exciting. But I maintain that it is really hard to get people who are imprisoned by the system and the supply chain system that you talk about, and which we're very much sort of involved in. It's really difficult to create that change. We can talk at this level about all the things we do. We can talk about doing the right thing and it'll happen, but we are working within a system, and we can't pretend that we're not, even if we're trying to change it. So what are the things that you think we can do straight away? Are there any practical things that we can do immediately to try to move this thing forward, apart from getting together and having these conferences and talking ourselves?
I think that if we can define nutrient density, and we can build instruments that could be in people's hands, that would be a profound transformation of culture. I truly believe that if people... it didn't have to be a separate instrument. If it was just one of the cameras in your phone, and everybody got to know that they can go beep, beep, junk, boop, junk, boop, decent, and they could post it on social, they would totally get off on it. I think that kind of visceral, like, gotcha, and I found this out, did you know about it? We could engage all kinds of lower aspects of human, incentive. I really do think that the only way we're going to get solutions is bottom up. I think that it has to be foundationally, it has to be bottom up. It has to be an empowering framework. And that's why I'm making this argument that for $20 million, American, not Australian, we could have the foundation of a profound global social empowerment movement based on transparency and empiricism and science, so that we're beyond reproach in the formal scientific system, but with story around it that is based upon empowerment and inspiration and intuition. And, I really do think for a very, very small amount of money, crowdsourced, coalesced, we could come together and have the infrastructure. A friend of mine from the Netherlands, I think I said this yesterday, refers to it as a weapon of mass creation. We have the tool in our hands to see truth and to facilitate truth. And there's not much more, I think, that people really want right now than just some damn truth, right? There's so much dissuading, just storylines and manipulations and subtle control dynamics that people are really frustrated. And could we just have some damn truth? And so that's my idea, is we facilitate truth and honesty and transparency. And I think that would be a powerful strategy to facilitate these deeper social, cultural transformations.
I think you kind of skipped over it then when you said, what can we do immediately, besides being here? But actually listening over the last couple of days, I've sort of had my head in supply chains because that's what I talked about. And I've been trying to work out, so where is the opportunity for people to come up with better models for what they're doing? Where are they succeeding? And what it all comes back to is exactly what's happening on this farm and in this room at the moment, which is relationships. Everything is relational. Whether it was the guys up in the tent over there that were talking about the grain supply chain. So you had two farmers, I don't know if they're in the room, two farmers, a maltster and a distiller. And they were sitting across the room, and one of the farmers had just been through a drought and so knew that the quality of the grain that he was offering to the brewers was less than it had been previously. So was going into the negotiation to say, I realise I'm not going to get as much for my grain. And the brewers turned round and said, shit, mate, you need more this year because you've got less grain. So we're going to pay you what you need to get paid so that you're here next year. Now, no economic textbook on earth would that make sense. But why it makes sense is because of human relationships. So everybody, from your relationship from your family and your ability to go out and find people who feel the same way you do to find your customers, every single talk I've heard in the last 2 days have been about relationships. And funnily enough, Grounded happened because I said to Matthew Evans, you should really go to this groundswell thing, Matthew. And Matthew's like, nah, I don't have time. And he did. He went to it and he found a woman called Fran Bailey, who's also in the tent somewhere at the moment. And Fran was working on Groundswell, and he met Fran, and together they connected with each other, and Grounded happened, and now there's going to be an Undergrounded in New Zealand. And it's such a tiny moment of connection, but it has such a powerful outcome. So the answer in terms of what we can do in the immediate term is to continue fostering and finding relationship.
Yeah, I'd like to second that, and I think part of how we can try and foster those relationships is with authentic storytelling, and I think that's really an important part, and I think events like this enable that too, and just keep at it for the now. meantime, until you get your bionutrient measure up and functioning. But yeah, just continuing with that authentic storytelling so we can all come together in the right way.
I think I might throw it out to you guys, because I think you guys probably have a lot to contribute. So,
thank you. Thanks, panel. It's a little bit of preamble, sorry.
in that case, can I ask you to speak? Thank you very much.
G'day, thank you. That was awesome. Farmers have been the base of civilization for generations. At the moment, our system is imbalanced, and farmers have been forced to feed the masses by bulk production and find efficiencies of production to make it cheap. It's a system that's broken. Another system that's broken is actually our healthcare system, and should we reimagine both our healthcare system and our food system combined so that food production is actually the start of our health journey? Do you think that's worthwhile pushing out there and thinking about?
Who wants to take that first this time?
Well, absolutely. I mean, I think they're just so intrinsically linked, as we've experienced fully through the last couple of days, and totally that's how it should be, and should never have ever gone from there, but it has, and yeah, we can work to pull it back.
Yeah, I think there's a huge piece of Indigenous wisdom, global Indigenous wisdom, that we can step into in this space to understand that food is medicine and that food is life. And perhaps it's just the worldview through which we've been forced to look that's allowed us to forget it. So to sit down, be quiet and listen to some other perspectives to understand the connection between food and health.
Yeah, I think foundationally that's part of the strategy that I see, is that as we increase the quality of food, we don't need the fertilizers, we don't need the insecticides, we don't need the fungicides, we don't need the pharmaceuticals. A lot of the things that are, I mean, the way I see it is we have these large corporate interests that have significant profits that effectively control the government. And they control the government because they have the money, because we're buying the things and giving them the money. And so we are the problem by putting our money into those companies. And as we begin to create a dynamic where we don't put money into those companies and they have less money, then they can do less of a good job buying the politicians. And then we actually can have a government that is more holistic and balanced and healthy. So foundationally, I would say absolutely that's exactly how I see this whole thing going down, is we suck the life force out of the problems by not feeding them anymore, because we're working in harmony with nature as opposed to this colonized mindset. I would say, just a minor point in response to your question or your statement about farmers have been the foundation of civilization. I don't know how we define civilization. I've had this conversation in a few different frameworks. When you go back to quote unquote agriculture, which is, tillage and monocultures, or do we go back how many tens of thousands of years in this continent of civilization, which I would argue was very sophisticated, which I don't know. I mean, I guess maybe there was something resembling monocultures in certain areas, but as I understand it, across the planet, humans have been living in deep symbiosis with the land, producing food, not as separate, like we're farmers and cities, but as animals in relationship with nature. And my thought is, like, I was brought up in this Western cultural framework that history started with, Mesopotamia somewhere, 4,000 years ago with agriculture, and everything before that was hunter-gatherers, and they were sort of these random people walking around, picking stuff up and living in primitive lives. And I think that is a story which is completely false. I think there was a story of human culture, call it civilization, call it culture, call it what you want to call it, which was founded in our deep relationship with land. And, as far as I'm concerned, the more we remove ourselves from nature the more we live in these denatured environments, these boxes, we're in front of screens, we don't have fresh air, we aren't in nature, the more denatured we become, the more we are killing ourselves. Like we will just die, right? It's not like, it's just nature. It's called survival. It's called evolution. You evolve or you devolve. And what's exciting to me is I think we're at the edge of that right now, where if we keep this up, we're just not going to be alive anymore. Or those who continue in that path will not be alive anymore. And it's not a question of what should happen or how can we control civilization or how should we change. Nature is actually in charge, and that's where we belong, is in relationship with, and in in relationship with. So I think that's the foundation of civilization. This idea of farmers and industry and money and that, it's just like, I think, the more we can step back and take it a step back and a step back, the more exciting it seems to me. So,
just on that health thing, I sometimes feel like I run a pharmacy, not a butchery, because the customers who come to us for food that is going to fix their diseases, it's incredible. It's an epidemic out there of diet-related food problems, and definitely food is the answer, and people instinctively do know that, So, Georgie?
I don't want to be negative, but you could argue that many farmers that farm better don't necessarily receive a financial reward for farming better from the consumer currently. I'm looking to the organics and that sort of stuff. No, you can repeat it. What makes you think that they're going to pay for nutrient density? Because all the science is already out. There's a lot of science already out there proving the same argument. So,
Georgie's saying, how is it that we can be so confident that consumers will pay for nutrient density, which is,
I already said, from a farmer's perspective, you lower your cost of production and you don't need to charge more. If you're working in relationship to nature, you don't need to charge more. I'm not sure if you came in late, but that was one of the opening points. Yeah, I think there's going to be opportunities where premiums will be offered, but foundationally, farm viability, it's the less money you spend, the less you need to make. And I consider that we are, as farmers, being sold a number of bills of unnecessary goods by people trying to sell us stuff. And we're suckers in many cases. And until we can realize that and realize that nature has all the things just about that we need for our lands to function, and we, stop spending money on unnecessary things, and that will also be a powerful aspect of our economic viability. I don't think we need to charge more.
not charge more, but just be paid the actual price for the work they're doing.
Yeah, that was my challenge. Did you come in late, or were you just asleep in the first? Yeah. I'm joking. It's all right. I'll buy you a beer later. It's fine. I understand what you're saying, and I answered the question by saying absolutely. How do farmers get paid more for nutrient density? And I think the answer to that is blowing up the infrastructure of the middle. So absolutely setting it alight and hand grenading it and redesigning how farmers get food to eaters, and how we work on those relationships so we end up in a situation where the farmer who's in the middle of a drought is getting supported by the people who are buying his grain. That's what success looks like to me. It's all relational.
And it does come down to that deep systems change, because one thing we're not factoring in, there might be lower input costs perhaps in the actual cultivation of growing the produce. But when you're looking at, we have got a society now where the bulk of the population are in cities, and whilst it'd be lovely if we could all be growing our own food, that's not going to be a reality anymore. And we have very small and diminishing farming populations, which we're rapidly trying to, reinvigorate. But in the meantime, we've got big farms trying to grow food with machinery that's worth more than the land that it's working, with fuel and so forth in this country that's, escalating in prices and things like that. So a lot of those things affect that profitability over and above. You know, we have a very cost-effective natural fertility system on our farm, which is absolutely marvellous, but we still have to use the tractors and so forth, which, you know, $2 million for a harvester. And we need two. But we don't have new ones. We've got very old ones that we maintain, but even the parts and accessibility and all those things. So we've really got to look at the whole thing. I was trying to say, as a society, how do we prioritise all the bits that need to fit this puzzle to make it work? We can do it, but it's just going to take a bit of, you know, concerted attention. It's not a simple fix, but we can do it.
I just want to say, we should not be in cities. We don't belong in cities. As long as we're trying to support people living in cities, we're missing the point, right? That the cities are spaces where extraction occurs, where life force is harvested and sucked, right? This is the structure of the colonizer, right? The way it's designed right now is profoundly perverse. And if all of our solutions are predicated on an assumption that we're attempting to maintain this dynamic, we're never going to come to holistic, you know, systemic shift. Like, I understand people are comfortable in their malaise, or they don't have the biochemical energy. They don't have the you know, the function in their ability to think and move. But really, I think we need to question the structure of culture in a very deep fashion, because it is not tenable, right? If we keep this up for another generation, we are going to be dead. And that's not our responsibility as we people on the land. We are not responsible for those people, right? We can support them, we can empower them, we can facilitate, but I think it's about occupying the land systemically. We need to facilitate or provide pathways for those who want to unplug from that. I mean, that's, for me, in my mind, like, as long as we're trying to figure out how to maintain the current trajectory, the current structure of culture, we're missing the point. There's all this stuff about, you know, now 50% of people live in cities. Isn't that a wonderful progress? No, that's atrocious. That's atrocious, right? You have sovereignty, you have tenure, you have, and we call this thing that we have this Jeffersonian ethic. It was Thomas Jefferson was one of our first presidents, wrote the Declaration of Independence, one of our founding documents in the U.S. And the thesis is that the only way to have a functioning democracy where people don't follow these sociopaths and vote for them is when people have tenure on land and they have independent, self-sufficient landowners. It's only when the populace has their own land that they can pass on to their children and their grandchildren, and they don't need money to live, that they can begin thinking in that 7-generation mentality, that they can be making long-term, systemically healthy decisions. When your lifestyle is like, you know, I barely have enough money to pay rent and I don't know how I'm going to get this and everything else, you're not in a place of holistic, systemic decision-making. Right? We have to unposit this development cities is good framework, as far as I'm concerned, from a holistic perspective.
I think there's a lot of people who say that cities are pretty crap and we've got a real problem on our hands. So I don't think it's necessarily people saying that cities are so great. And in the meantime, until we unpack this system and blow it up and do all these things, which I absolutely subscribe to, in the meantime, we have to feed those people in cities and we have to try to, you know, to convince them to change their mindset. And people self-organise into communities. We were talking about biodiversity earlier. Biodiversity finds its expression wherever you go if you give it the opportunity. So we have a community in my little urban environment which is powerful, and there's actually a really fabulous barter economy. And we see the community thriving around the sort of stuff that we bring in from farmers like you, and that's powerful, and that's creating slow change. But you know, I mean, I think what you're talking about is amazing, but we somehow have to get to that point. You know, and farmers do have to get paid properly, and the structures we currently work within make all of those things really difficult. I'm just saying that, that's all. I know that. And I was here from the beginning, so, you know. So stick it. Has got a question?
Our kids are going to be dead.
I know.
Just once.
I know.
Our children are not able to reproduce. Our children are dying of cancer. It is completely at like I'm not sure, maybe it's not quite as bad here in Australia as it is in the States. It's pretty damn bad. We just have to have this conversation and just open up the space. And humans do amazing things because they're amazing in all the environments that we're in. I completely grant that and 100%. But a lot of them are working for money, for companies that are doing deeply destructive things because they don't know how to grow their own food, because they can't build their own house, because the structures of property make it untenable for everyone. Like these are systemically atrocious things, right? And I don't think we're going to get real healing until we have this conversation. This is part of what we're trying to do organizationally at the BFA, is build these landing strips, like have places like this where people can have the opportunity to learn skills and facilitate an off-ramp for 5-10 acre lots, facilitate like the structure of re-indigenization. Like, can we think strategically of models to facilitate that process because we're so deeply denatured, we don't have practical skills. In most cases, most people literally can't provide for themselves. They need the life support systems of culture, of the structure, because they are so inept. And we foundationally need to be thinking about how to rebuild those skills.
Yeah, well, good point.
Should we make food is cool in schools, in the curriculum? Start with young people and educate their communities. And in universities, agriculture universities grow food on campus, so every discipline can see how cool it is to pull a carrot from the ground. As a start, because the problems are so huge, and some farms are so far away from urban areas. Yes, there are peri-urban farms to educate, but should we go back to schools and make growing food a cool thing?
The question is, should we make growing food a cool thing, starting with, educating children and going all the way through the education system? I think there is already quite a lot of that happening, and there needs to be more. I mean, everybody should have access to growing food. We should have little farms all through our cities everywhere anyway. But yes, some of that is happening, but by all means, maybe I'm going to pass it.
I just thought, along with that, one of the things General Jeffrey was really strong on when we were working with him was he wanted to have a vegetable garden or a mini farm with every school for all the children to, really understand, appreciate that, and develop those skills to be able to start to be able to grow food for themselves and realise how possible it was, and whatever environment they lived in, whether they had a balcony available to them or whatever else, that they understood that they could at least grow some of the food for themselves. So, yeah, absolutely would be a brilliant idea.
Yeah, and I support that. And there are amazing, in New Zealand, there's something called Garden to Table. So it's a program that means that every child in that program has the ability and opportunity to grow food and also to prepare food and share food with, because that's the other thing we're missing. It's not just not knowing how to grow food, it's also knowing how to sit down at a table with someone that you are fundamentally different from and be able to find commonality, and food offers us that opportunity as well. And I had this beautiful moment in a school, and the school was a rural school, and the majority of people were European New Zealanders. There was one Chinese family in the school, and it was Chinese Language Week, and so all of the menu and the dishes were Chinese. And for that 1 week, that Chinese kid was the hero of the school, because he had the knowledge and he had the understanding and he could teach everyone. And just watching this one kid just absolutely grow and beam because he had the opportunity to bring his wisdom to a table through food, and to share with people who didn't look like him, was so powerful. It was epic.
There's a book called The Underground History of American Education, written by a guy named John Taylor Gatto. He won the New York State Teacher of the Year award twice. and he recounts the history of the education system, which was specifically designed to remove children from their families and practical skills and indoctrinate them to prepare them to be cogs in the industrial wheel. The underground history of American education was the education system, the mandated education system was put together by Andrew Carnegie and the, you know, it was the what was it, no, it wasn't Rockefellers, it was before Rockefellers, it was the university in New York City, that's like the Columbia University, because they needed people to do repetitive motion in factories, and any self-respecting farm kid has no desire to go sit in a building and be a cog in an industrial wheel. And the only way they could facilitate people being willing to be effective wage slaves was to remove them from their traditional cultural wisdom, which was handed on to them by practical skills being learned in multi-generational cultural frameworks. It's an indoctrination system, right? We have this concept that schools are beneficial. It's an indoctrination system. It's a cultural appropriation system, right? This is not systemically beneficial. We do it because our parents are wage slaves, right? The parents are wage slaves, and so they don't have time to spend time with their children, right? And we think this is beneficial. And he walks through the level of literacy from the French and Indian War to the Revolutionary War, to the War of 1812, to the Civil War, to the Mexican-American War, to all the wars. And the U.S. military has been documenting levels of literacy. And guess what's been happening? Dropping. Till the Vietnam War, when they had to use pictographs for people to be able to run the military equipment. Right? It's an indoctrination system. These things we are taught to be feeling proud of are the actual perversions of our culture. We are so colonized in our thinking. It's profound.
Stuck.
Okay, who else?
Hi, this is kind of funny to follow up on that. You'll probably accuse me of being colonised in my thinking, and maybe I am. But I also want to acknowledge that on the stage you have West Australian of the Year, and with that die comes, you have the ear of the government on a silver platter. And I'm wondering, well, maybe not quite, but I'm wondering, is there any key messages that you have? And as somebody, I have had personal experience of wins with making relationships with local MPs, and even when I haven't, I feel like there's a personal responsibility that if I see something, I should say something. I can't control the outcome, but I think we all have a responsibility to say something to the government because they represent us. And so I'm just wondering if you have any key messages that we can unite on if we are people that like to write letters.
So that's a hard question to paraphrase. So the question is, Di, you've got this fabulous platform to speak from because you won WA 2025 Australian of the Year. And so the question is, have you got any suggestions for people who want to advocate or agitate with their politicians for what they should be pushing for? Is that correct?
We're still formulating that. We've been given a bit of a time frame to try and get it together because we'll only have a very brief period. If we were successful in the national event, well then that would certainly change things a lot because we'd have a lot more opportunity to spread the message, and we are working on what sort of things, but I guess a lot of it's very similar messages to what have been here for the last couple of days. Very much that's the key things because they're the issues that we're needing to address front and centre, from our perspective anyway, as farmers and members of a community and members of a planetary system as well. That's what we're looking at and trying to help people in the community realise that they can be as an effective ground force as what the farmers are. That we all need to come together on it as members of communities to make those changes. So, watch this space. We are working on it. But, yeah, any contributions of things that people are feeling, are the most urgent, we are certainly, pulling that together at the moment.
I assume that nutrient density isn't a term that most politicians have heard, so I'm just wondering, maybe I'm wrong, but just wondering if those discussions and education are happening.
I think the health linkages are becoming fairly understood. Certainly pushing that side of the thing is really important. Just from the brief opportunities we've had since, in the past couple of weeks, that is becoming, a really strong area of interest is just the health links, but also, the climate action and all the rest of the parts to it. I mean, the thing is, it is such a complex story, such a massive story. We are really looking to spend some time to really look at those critical ones that might trigger, if we can. Yeah.
Matthew, we've got, it's now 4:56. We should wrap it up. Okay. All right. We're wrapping it up. Matthew says wrap it up. We're wrapping it up. Can you please thank our wonderful panel?